The Middle East remains a hot battle with rising tensions. Hello to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's edition of the program. It is Global Insight on the Pan-African Television, Pan-African Television for you, Media Africa, and we continue to analyze stakes in the Middle East, looking at the latest development, the advancement of Israel in Rafah, also looking at the latest revelations that came as a result of the decision by the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to issue an arrest warrant to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. The latest development in the Middle East, including Israel advancement in Rafah, the decision by ICC chief prosecutor to seek an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas leader Sinwar and co, and most especially the demise of Iran's leader Ibrahim Raisi, has brought the entire region and even global landscape to ask the question of what to expect pertaining these past events. We are going during this program to analyze the increasing tension in the region following the demise of Iran's president and the political implications for the future, particularly of the Middle East, Iran, and other stakeholders. As the Middle East faces heightened risks of instability, we will equally explore what to expect in the coming months regarding leadership transitions, regional dynamics. So following Raisi's demise, what are the potential impact on Iran's domestic politics and regional alliances, to the broader implications for stability in the Middle East? What shifts can we anticipate in Iran's posture and strategy with the new interim leaders as tensions continue to rise in the Middle East pertaining the crisis between Israel and Palestine? And if you are just tuning in, welcome to Global Insight this day. We're going straight away to uncover the panel to the United States of America. We're being joined this day by Steve GILL, a political commentator who also doubles as a radio host. Hello to you, Steve, and thanks for joining us to discuss the Middle East this day.
Thanks for having me with you, Clarice.
Always a pleasure. And to the part of Russia, we are meeting PURNIMA, ANAND, president of BRICS International Forum. She's from India, but joining us today from Russia. Hello to you, dear PURNIMA. A pleasure having you this day.
Thank you, Clarice. Fine, I am good. And it is winter in Russia. And I am coming from Delhi, where it was red alert and weather. Sun heat was 48 degrees Celsius, and here I am at 7 degrees Celsius.
And that's what makes the global world. Thank you so much for making out time to be with us this day. PURNIMA, and just to remind us of that, YULIA BERG, a political scientist and founder of GLOBUS Expert Club from Russia, will be joining subsequently. Without wasting time, we are going to dive straight away. Steve, kicking off with you, looking at the general perspective, the latest development in the Middle East. Let's first of all start with the encroachment of Israeli forces in the Rafah.
Well, it's interesting that the United States is pausing the delivery of weapons to Israel. Many of them are the precision weapons that would reduce collateral damage, reduce civilian casualties, but the Biden administration is holding back the delivery of those weapons and trying to instruct Israel how to conduct itself as they further move towards taking out the Hamas terrorists that occupy Gaza. And we're seeing new video of the atrocities that were committed on October 7th and since. as they continue to hold hostages in Rafah, many of whom are now presumed dead or turning up dead. So the negotiations to get release of hostages is really going nowhere and has gone nowhere. And then we also learned that the Biden administration has been withholding intelligence information about the top leadership of Hamas in Rafah that could lead to their deaths that would help slow or stop the need for military action there. So the Biden administration is, as usual, throwing fuel on the fire, making things worse rather than finding a solution. And again, Hamas could end this conflict by releasing the hostages that remain. They could have done this months ago when many of them were still alive. Unfortunately, it keeps the conflict alive. And the hypocrisy of the Biden administration in withholding weapons from Israel because of the concern of civilian casualties in Gaza and Rafah in particular is inconsistent with continuing to provide weapons to Ukraine that are used to bombard civilian targets, clearly civilian targets in Donbass, in Donetsk, in Mariupol, where we've been together. They're killing civilians with U.S. supplied weapons, and yet the Biden administration has no problem with continuing to supply those weapons and increase the supply of weapons that are targeting innocent civilians. So the Biden administration is all over the map and doing nothing to decrease the number of fires that are breaking out all over the world.
And which is imperative if we want to ensure global peace. We need leaders to come together to take decisions that will quell the tension that we have in the world at this particular moment. When we talk about the Middle East, we're looking at the war in Gaza. Dear PURNIMA, coming to you. And of course, we know with the latest development pertaining particularly the demise of Iran's president, and we also know that this country actually has some stakes as far as the crisis between Israel and Palestine and the Gaza Strip is concerned, also bilateral relations between Israel and Iran. So what becomes next for Iran, particularly Iran's diplomacy after the demise of its President Ebrahim Raisi?
Thank you. This is a very important question in current situation, because we know our world is rapidly changing, and these changes are not limited to any political or spiritual realm. And this accident is it is natural or it is done. It is a question. And Ebrahim Raisi was very important leader of Iran, and he was recently joined in 2023-24, they joined BRICS group, and he was coordinating between Muslim countries to invite them in BRICS group. So this was his important work, and recently I am in Russia. We were in many tribute programs to which held in Russia. So we come to know that that day when he visited in his helicopter. He was having many helicopters, but mostly helicopter series was from Russia. Sure. But that day, especially, he chose, or his security chose, American helicopter. And that was the accidental cause, maybe, because these are connected with the security system. So it is really very sad demise and very big loss, especially to BRICS bloc, because his work was credible, and he was very much important leader of Muslim communities, and he was uniting, and he was the leader who can face the challenge.
Sure.
With Israel, he was struggling very strongly, and he was taking action against Israel, and that was his strong will, and his credibility cannot be forgotten by the whole Muslim world and BRICS bloc, because he was having capacity to accept the challenges. Similarly, last 2 years when Russia-Ukraine crisis were happening, he was continuously supporting to Russia. He was good friend of India, because he was trying to create triangle between Russia, Iran and India against other Muslim countries, and we are having very South Global Corridor also, where we are developing new railway routes for the transition of defense and other trade products. So this is a trade route and railway route from Russia to India. Till Iran it reached, and little space was left. So many rule regulation and system is required. And here Mr. Reis was working very strongly, and he was committed to create route between Russia, Iran and India.
Yeah.
So this is a big loss, and unfortunately, world faced it, and I hope next leadership and next diplomatic lines will be same strong. They will learn lesson from their leader, and hope we will get positive leadership in Iran.
Indeed, it's about a leadership that is intentional about protecting the sovereignty and ensuring that peace returns to the country, particularly that would transcend to the Middle East. We continue with you, Steve. While talking earlier on, you were so categorical about the role of the United States under its leadership, Joe Biden, patterning the U.S. position in the crisis in the Middle East. We are also aware that recently, or just a few days ago, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court actually submitted a plea to seek an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the head of the Hamas sin war, and other leaders who, according to the court and their investigations, have been found guilty of crimes against humanity. And now the question is, with the coming of the declaration from the ICC chief prosecutor, we got reactions from Israel itself and also from the United States, calling it a sham. And of course, once you try to relate the two scenarios, it was when the arrest warrant was issued against Russian President Putin, Biden said it was justified, but this is not the case with the case with Benjamin Netanyahu. How would things alter the diplomatic policies of these countries, especially NATO countries that recognize the International Criminal Court?
Well, I think it's interesting that the U.S. is not a signatory to the ICC. Israel is not. Britain is not. So you have this International Criminal Court out there issuing these arrest warrants to whoever they want to, but the U.S. and others are not included in the target sites of the ICC and don't hold it as credible when it comes to our own countries. President Putin, again, being targeted. You now have Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israelis are concerned that the genocide that was committed against civilians, that was targeting civilians by Hamas, is being put on the same level as the collateral damage that caused when you're fighting in a city as dense as Gaza and Rafah and those portions of Gaza. If you're hiding behind innocent men, women, and children, there will be innocent men, women, and children who were killed not because they're targeted, but because they are the victims of those on the Hamas side using them as shields. The same thing is interesting to me that we're not seeing President Zelensky of Ukraine cited when we have seen atrocities, not just recently in the last couple of years, as the eastern Ukrainian citizens who identify with Russia have been targeted by the Azov brigades, by the militias that have been dispatched by Ukraine for a decade, who've killed and murdered and raped, and yet President Zelensky is not being held accountable for that. So I think that whether it's the U.S., whether it's Israel, whether it's worldwide, there should be condemnation of the ICC for their non-even-handed approach to when they see atrocities and ignore some and highlight others. Let me also, by the way, mention that PURNIMA, your work with BRICS is vital and is important. In the United States, unfortunately, I think if we asked most people on the streets what they think about BRICS, they would comment that, well, I like BRIC, but aluminum siding and other outdoor structures on my home are good too. There's no understanding of what BRICS is, what it means, and how it may affect global economy for years to come. And treating it as something to ignore is not good foreign policy or economic policy for the United States. Sadly, I think if we ask most members of our Congress, what do they think about BRICS? They'd have the same answer. They try to add it, whether it's siding for your house as aluminum siding or bricks that you used in building. And I think it is important that what Purnima and her groups are doing to highlight and expand this trading group that is peaceful, is focused on economic trading, and that's how you build relationships. I mean, our relationships, Purnima, you, Clarice, we meet as people. We have disagreements sometimes on policy issues, but if we're working together, and trade is the best way to do that, then all things in the world are a lot more peaceful and work a lot better. So, my friend Purnima, I commend you and what your teams are doing to expand BRICS and also to explain it so that people around the world will understand that it's an important and vital way that goods and services and products can be moved across nations' lines. Even if there are military and political disagreements, we still ought to be able to buy and sell stuff.
Very imperative.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, Purnima, you were saying to...
Let me add to Mr. Steve, because it is very important that people should know the expansion of BRICS and importance of BRICS. BRICS becoming alternative to United Nations Security and World Bank and other economic institutions in the Western world. But there is a control. Recently, there was a United Nations Finance meeting was happening. This is annual meeting, and there all alliances comes and they speak about their economy and finances and investments. So their BRICS bloc was also going to speak and raise their requirements, and discussion was held. Under that, they didn't give visa to Russian authorities to reach there. So it was a very big chaos, because Russia is a chair of the BRICS summit this year, and they were not able to reach there on time, and it was an international issue, and there is no international BRICS organizations legally recognized anywhere, because BRICS is not having any official headquarters like United Nations.
Okay,
so it is a question.
I think we'll try to look for time out there, Purnima, to talk in total about the BRICS organization. But today, I think we should focus on the Middle East and seeing how even the BRICS, because you highlighted, dear Purnima, that it has an objective to replace some multilateral institutions, international institutions, which according to the happenings in the world is no longer, or these institutions are no longer meeting the objectives of ensuring international peace and security. We are aware that Iran joined the BRICS in 2024 along Egypt and other countries. So aligning with these ideologies and agenda in trying to define a new world order that will bring about peace, particularly in also in a crisis area like the Middle East. So the question is, what would the demise of a leader mean for the BRICS, and of course mean also for the anticipated resolve of the crisis pertaining Israel and Palestine with the Iran's advocated solutions?
This is very big loss to the BRICS group, because Ibrahim Rais was doing very good coordination between Islamic countries, as I earlier said. And this is really important that BRICS need new financial and democratic institution to ally with the BRICS groups and BRICS New Development Bank. And as you know, Muslim countries and Muslim banks are having different rules, not like Western banks. They don't take rate of interest, they cooperate and they become the alliance of business project. So this was a new structure which is very suitable for the BRICS investment groups. Recently, I were in Kazan Islamic Economic Forum. Why Kazan Islamic Economic Forum is rising during last 2-3 years? Because BRICS countries got new solution of financial alliances, like World Bank and other Western banks take rate of interest and then they give the loans to expand your business or economic zones. But in Islamic world, in Islamic economy, they will become your alliance, and when business will grow, then you have to repay them, or you need to do charity. So this is very good solution, and many countries are adopting Islamic bank funding, and this was multiple collaboration. Recently, 208 agreements were signed with Islamic banks. So this is very big contribution of Muslim world. And Ibrahim Raisi was doing very active role. And he was visiting to many Muslim countries to unite and to get participation in upcoming BRICS summit. So it is very big loss, and I think this BRICS needs such leadership, and somebody will come up and he will take the lesson from Ibrahim Raisi initiatives in Muslim world.
Which is very imperative, and of course, how can we chart the path or the way forward during this very fragile moment in the situation happening in the Middle East, particularly between Israel, Palestine, and the Gaza Strip. We're going to continue in the same perspective, Steve, looking at the interconnectedness of the crisis in the Middle East, and how some internal policies in Iran patterning the demise of its president Ibrahim Raisi will affect the stability of the Middle East. So with this in mind, let's look at how this is going to have potential, implications for stability within the country, and particularly extending to the Middle East with the involvement of external powers.
I think there are really two avenues to discuss. One is, what is the internal complications of his death in terms of the political operations within Iran?
Yeah.
Who steps in? Who's the successor? Will it be somebody who is going to follow with as Purnima was saying, to expand BRICS into the Muslim world, or will it be somebody who is less attuned to sort of the business interests? And I think that chaos and that instability within Iran will take some time to sort itself out. I think externally, it also remains to be seen whether or not Iran can find ways to find its way, back into sort of the community of nations, as rather than being a supporter financially and otherwise of terrorism, whether they can find a path towards, again, re-emerging as someone that can be part of the community of nations. We've talked, Clarice, we've talked Purnima in the past of there will be an after with the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And there's no real conversation taking place at any great level on what's next. How do we repair a relationship with the United States, with Western Europe and Russia? And I think the same thing needs to be being discussed. And maybe this is an opportunity with new leadership to find a new path to conversation and perhaps a path towards peaceful reconciliation with Iran as well. But unfortunately, countries don't think ahead. They don't think about what's going to happen after Ukraine and Russia conflict comes to an end. How do we start rebuilding a relationship and bring Russia back into to the community of nations? Stop this, business of indicting and sending arrest warrants that prevent President Putin from going to Germany, as the German chancellor has pointed out. If he comes here, we'll arrest him. You can't have world leaders who are locked into their countries and expect to find a way that the community of nations can operate, because conversation and credibility and trust are at the forefront of everything, whether it's political conversation or whether it's economic conversation. You have to have the ability to communicate and to trust each other, and you have to build that over time.
quite imperative. I'm staying with you, Steve, with all that you've actually underlined. What could be or could the uncertainty surrounding the Iran's leadership transition actually bring about a strategic shift that might escalate tension further in the Middle East? And if that be the case, how can this be averted?
Well, again, as usual, when there's a death of a world leader that is as significant as Raisa, it's a fork in the road. And whether Iran will pursue a path to try and find a path of better communication and better involvement with the West, or whether they will become more hardline than they already are. I mean, it's a choice that they have to make, and their internal decisions will have an impact on the global economy, certainly on peace in the Middle East. You are seeing some countries in the Middle East move towards a peaceful involvement in the conflict with Israel, whether it's Jordan, whether it's Saudi Arabia. The Abraham Accords were moving us in the right direction, and it'll wait to be seen whether this death of Raisa delays that, makes that more difficult, and whether the conflict in Gaza can come to an end sooner rather than later, so that some sort of path to peace can be rebuilt.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. Just to remind televiewers joining on that this is Global Insight on For You Media Africa, and we continue to look at how the situation in the Middle East can be averted as tension is rising day by day. Now we have the latest development looking at the diplomatic implications of situations in the Middle East pertaining the demise of Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi, and of course looking at the potential of the International Criminal Court in issuing an arrest warrant for the leaders actually guilty of committing some crimes against humanity in the Middle East. And how feasible is this? How can the tension be quelled, and how can countries be more strategic and diplomatic in bringing resolve, particularly to the conflicts in the Middle East, to bring respite to the population, as you highlighted, Steve and PURNIMA, to the vulnerable population, particularly in the Gaza Strip? We continue with the same perspective, looking at the credibility of the International Criminal Court, even if it has to come in or step in to bring about a lasting solution to this to the crisis. You know, when the chief prosecutor was talking in the person of Karim Khan to responding to a question from a journalist, he was very categorical about why the ICC was created, and he made mention that the one leader whom he kept the identity anonymous said to him that the court was created for Africa and for a president like Vladimir Putin. And now we want to look at the credibility of this court, even in being fair towards treating the situation in the Middle East, if we have to involve a body like the ICC in quelling the tension. PURNIMA, I direct this question to you.
Clarice, this is ICC is a law of forest, wild law. It is developed for the Roman statute, and 7 countries were member of this law. But later on, I don't know when this law is adopted by United Nations and America, and this law is now working in Africa or on Vladimir Putin. So this is a question, but as Middle East situation is arising, diplomatically and on social values, I must say that we should stepping a stone towards a future where Europe, Asia and Middle East work hand in hand and united by shared values and common goals. Together we can navigate and complexity of our time and build a world that is more just, peaceful and prosperous for generations to come. This is the only objective we can choose in current turbulence time, because whatever is happening, whatever laws are working, whatever crisis is between Ukraine, Russia, Hamas and Israel happening, it is not good for humanity. So we need peaceful, prosperous world, and we need to work together. We come with shared values together.
Indeed, it's about shared values and putting the interest of the susceptible population first before political interest among leaders of the world. Yulia BERG just joined us at the moment. Of course, I'll be welcoming you with this question. Dear Yulia, we are actually looking at the rising tensions in the Middle East pertaining the advancement of Israeli forces in Rafah, and also how the demise of Iran's president will seemingly complicate issues in the Middle East. We want to have your perspective on this.
Unfortunately, the only thing that we can expect in the Middle East right now is a major escalation. And the reason for that is the fact that there is a pure genocide happening, because there is no other definition you can give to a situation in which 70% of the victims are females and children. So you cannot call it a military operation anymore when the victims are women and children, basically. That's number one. And definitely this genocide kind of a happening is causing anger, is causing rage, and is causing a lot of counteractions, and would be causing probably a lot more of counteractions from the other side. Which is logically explained, right? And then number two is the fact that the Iranian leader died under quite strange circumstances, but this is not even, it's not even essential what exactly happened there, even though it's of great importance. But what's important to mention in terms of the escalation that is upcoming is that for a long time, Iran itself and its policy has been a major stone in the shoe for the, let's call them globalists, right? And it was interfering with the Western-based model of geopolitics. So I don't think we should be expecting major changes in the policy of Iran itself, but there will be attempts to shaking up the situation in the country, and Iran definitely plays a huge role, not just at the regional, but also at the global arena. And now it's a part of BRICS, which means that there is that link to China, India, Russia, South Africa, and we will see how the situation will be unfolding. But unfortunately, those two facts are clear indicators that a major escalation is coming up.
Absolutely, an escalation, I think, is what people do not want at this particular moment, especially people at the front line. Staying with you, dear Yulia, when you said that escalation is coming soon, so what are those strategies that major stakeholders at the helm of bringing resolve in this crisis can take to ensure that the limit this escalation, given that a major personality like the president of Iran has already died under unforeseen circumstances, though it has been revealed that the weather wasn't very favorable, and the weather condition actually led to the crash of the copter that carried Ibrahim Raisi. How can we avert or mitigate this escalation?
Any conflict is lack of understanding, right? So any conflict is based on interests that differ, and at the same time, inability to talk about those interests and find a common solution that would be peaceful, right? Yet at the same time, for instance, what we see happening between Israel and Palestine is basically denial of the Palestinian right to exist. So the position that is taken by Israel and was taken by Israel a while ago is based on complete denial. Complete denial of Palestinian interest, which is even logically a bit, falling out of any framework, because Israel is a state that was just founded after the beginning of the of the World War II. So it's a new state, and even though it has a history, and the people of Israel, the Jewish people, have a long history that dates back to thousands of years ago. At the same time, the denial of Palestinian interest, their right to exist, is one of the key issues that makes it almost impossible to resolve the conflict. So there are many examples of, and many historical cases when even stronger disagreements were being settled at negotiation tables. Yet to do that, there has to be readiness to sit at the negotiation table, and I think that a lot of the current events and a lot of the current confrontation between not just Israel and Palestine, but also between many other Muslim and non-Muslim countries, has to do with the fact that Israel is in that denial phase when it's trying to expand its territories. And when you look at the maps of what it was back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on, you will see that it got to obtain new lands, and that was happening almost every decade. But that was at the expense of the Palestinians for a great extent.
So now, how might the conflicts, or how might neighboring countries and actually global powers navigate the evolving situation in the Middle East, given that the misunderstanding between parties actually has aggravated the situation, making the region very fragile? Now, with the major stakeholders, we know the United States, we also know Iran, Syria, and other neighboring countries around the Gaza Strip, and even Israel, Palestine. How can these countries navigate the evolving dynamics in the Middle East? Yulia.
Well, the current leadership of Israel is quite radical. So you see even the military operation that they unrolled is a very cruel one, when they don't care not just about the civilians, but also about the victims among children and females. So in order to have that kind of a discussion, there has to be either some major pressure applied from the international arena on the current leadership of Israel, or they would have to change their position to a less radical one, or the world should wait till the change of leadership, because one of the key issues is the unwillingness to accept the fact of Palestinian existence itself. And the rhetorics that the officials use is way too harsh to find a negotiation settlement. But if you remember, even Trump, when he was still the acting president of the United States, was offering various kinds of peace plans. Mm-hmm. So maybe that kind of attempts in terms of offering peace plans and roadmaps to that, and implementation with the assistance or certain guarantees from other representatives of the international arena could work out.
Sure. Very imperative, putting the interest of the people first. Just to remind you, if you are just tuning in, you're welcome to Global Insider this day. Let me come back to you, Steve. We continue to look at the situation, the fragility of the situation, and asking questions, of course, in the same light with what I directed to Yulia. How can we mitigate this contestation among internal powers, that is Israel and Palestine, and particularly now with the external powers that have stakes in what is happening in the Middle East, particularly in the Gaza Strip?
Well, I'm going to disagree slightly with my friend Yulia. This particular conflict in Gaza was precipitated by the outrageous, horrific, barbaric attack on innocent men, women, and children by Hamas on October 7th. You didn't have Israeli tanks flowing into Gaza. You didn't have bombardment in Gaza. They precipitated it. They continued to retain the hostages, even when that would have been a path to stop the conflict. So I don't think you can blame Israel when Hamas not only started this fight, but also has refused to consider doing anything towards releasing the hostages that could have ended, at least had ceasefires as a result. Yeah, I think the problem in the Middle East is that these are long-standing conflicts. You know, Hamas's charter is to eradicate Israel. Iran wants to eradicate Israel. So as long as one side is saying, we want to destroy you and kill every one of you, you can't really find a path to peace along those accords. I don't think Israel is saying we want to kill every Palestinian, we want to kill every Muslim in the Middle East. They are wanting simply their territory to be retained. And I think there are paths to peace, to create a Palestinian state, to create Palestinian territories like Gaza, which was independent and was governing itself. They're the ones that elected Hamas to rule their territory. Billions have been spent on trying to make Hamas or make Gaza more hospitable and have hospitals and water structures and power structures. And Hamas made the decision to build tunnels and to make weapons rather than to use that money to benefit the lives of those who live in Gaza. So until we have leadership in some of these areas that is more concerned about their people, benefiting their people and women and children and future generations, putting them first rather than killing Jews and destroying Israel first. I think it was Golda Meir who said at one point in decades past, we will have peace in the Middle East when the Palestinians decide they love their children more than they hate the Jews. And I think we're at that same point, and it hasn't changed much. I'm going to have to run, but let me make one point about the ICC.
Yeah.
The major powers, the major political powers, are not part of it. So it is more of a bullying organization that, as you mentioned, Clarice, has a lot of signatories in Africa, small countries that they can bully and force to bend to their will. But the big countries, the big powerful countries, are not a part of it. So it is really a kind of a sham organization, and they can issue their arrest warrants on some and ignore the same atrocities committed by others. But they are not, in my view, a legitimate organization when it only is used to bully African countries rather than to actually play a role at the international arena. I look forward to joining you again. Appreciate you letting me join today, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon. Always good to see my friends Yulia and PURNIMA and you, Clarice, as well.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, Steve, and looking forward to seeing you subsequently as we continue to navigate and analyze the development across the global world, bringing constructive analysis into how the world can be made better for mankind, and think that is the imperative issue here. I will continue with you, dear Yulia. We are looking at the place of the ICC that Steve just ended with, which is a very imperative. And of course, if the ICC has the capacity to actually, you know, with the request for an arrest warrant on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other leaders who that they actually highlighted in the recent development, if this can make a difference as far as bringing an end to the onslaught in Gaza Strip.
Well, the warrant itself probably would not change the situation, even though it's a gesture. But it does mean that something would happen to Netanyahu, and we see that the ICC lately has lost its authority to a great extent, has lost its credibility. Moreover, that warrant that was issued, there was quite a lot of counter statements and counter actions from the side of the United States, and they do have a great impact also over that organization. So the warrant itself probably will not change the situation radically, yet at the same time, it is a step towards an alternative solution, which would probably imply settlement or de-escalation of the hot phase of the conflict.
Looking at the arrest warrant, you know, if it actually issued, especially against the leadership of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, it will put Western countries that recognize the court's jurisdiction in a tough spot. I see. So how would things alter the diplomatic policies, especially in France, Germany, Italy? I think these are NATO, Western nations that actually recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC. Can they actually vehemently issue an arrest warrant against Netanyahu, given the position of the West in the crisis that we face today in the Middle East? Yulia, this question is directed to you.
Yes, at the moment, as you can see by many different examples, we live in unprecedented times where a lot that is actually happening at the international arena has no examples in the past, right? And we see that the structure of international organizations and institutions is being questioned big time in terms of their actual impact, authority, and if they match what is written in their founding documents and statutes, right? So probably this case and maybe some other ones that would be following would just change the position of the ICC itself.
Changing the position of the ICC, I want us to, you know, stay a little bit on the credibility of the ICC, pertaining to the declaration made by Karim Khan about the objective of the court that was set up in 2002 to actually hold leaders accountable for crimes committed, most especially against humanity. So the problematic here is with the declaration saying that the court was created just for Africa and for Russian president, particularly Vladimir Putin. Where does this bring the credibility of the court, and how can this relate align now with the, you know, the revolution that has been happening since 2013 in Africa, pertaining the biased nature of the International Criminal Court? And with all of these realities, where do we see the capacity of this court even being able to make a great difference in the Middle East?
Well, probably we're coming to a point at which there will be a new organization or a new system to deal with this kind of conflicts at the international arena. Because you might also recall the famous case of Laurent Gbagbo, the ex-president of the Ivory Coast, that was accused of genocide, yet at the same time, and the happening at the court was even broadcasted, but it became like a soap opera that was quite funny to watch, because the people that claimed that they had proof when they faced the court, they actually denied that they had genocide proof, right? And then several years after the arrest and several years after the trial, he was released, but there was no apologies, and of course there was no way that the consequences of the coup d'etat that took place and the consequences of the civil war and all the lives that were lost were fixed. So I think that it's that point in time when some new kind of an institution or maybe a new system of dealing with international disagreements should arise.
Thank you for that, dear Yulia. Coming back, of course, to what we are actually navigating at the particular moment, the fragility of the situation in the Middle East pertaining the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Let's look at how this escalating tension is gradually affecting trade patterns in not actually Middle East, but across the global world, given that this region particularly is very strategic as far as their trade and energy route is concerned.
We're seeing that the developments on the African continent are probably the most accelerated ones if we look at the global map. And I think that the African continent will be, or is already, I'd rather say is already at the very avant-garde of the global changes, right? Because the African continent has a lot of there are a lot of, let's say, very basic reasons that underlie this statement. So number one, there is a huge population and very young active population. Number two, the continent is full of various kinds of resources. Number three, there is underdevelopment, which means that it's not just one particular niche that is empty, but quite a lot of those. Mm-hmm. And here, of course, the accelerated tempo will be starting from the very basic foundations of energy and logistical infrastructure that would launch many other economic processes. And I'm just giving this context in order to explain why it is, in my opinion, very logical and rational that the developments on the continent would require new approaches in terms of politics, in terms of the design of financial system, in terms of trade unions, in terms of actual implementation of the free trade zone agreement, and many other things. And the heritage that the continent received from the previous formations, colonial, then neo-colonial, then the ones with you know, a combination of factors and mixed, let's say, regimes where a certain kind of autonomy was given, yet it couldn't be called complete sovereignty. So a lot of that would be revised, and regional organizations are playing a huge role as they manage to reinforce the countries that enter into those and be open to partnerships that would allow to find synergy in those activities.
It's about finding a common ground that will actually suit the interest of every stakeholders in the process. Just to remind you that this is Global Insight, a discursive program that brings understanding to the issues affecting Africa and the global world at large, and looking at the interconnectedness of the global world and how we can together bring forth these general solutions to some of these problems. And today we are looking at how the Middle East being entangled is affecting the African continent and also affecting the Europe and elsewhere in the world, challenging the ideologies of globalization and international cooperation. And how can we then, as major stakeholders at the global stage, mitigate some of the wars that the world is having at the particular moment? Now we continue to understand the stakes with you, dear Yulia. Looking at it, we can see apparently that there's some sort of proxy war in the Middle East, as well as we can find in eastern Ukraine. So the question now is, where can we place the civil society in trying to come to a compromise, since it's very difficult to resolve this with proxy interest at play? Where is the place of civil society in solving and bringing back peace to the Middle East and elsewhere across around the world?
One of the key roles of the civil society is always in creation of horizontal networks and horizontal ties that allow to have solid foundations. And of course, people at their level, they're always interested in stability, prosperity. They're not interested in getting into major conflicts because that affects their life to a great extent. So the civil society could always come in with humanitarian aid, always can come in with creating those horizontal ties and basic understanding between the conflicting parties, because at the human being level, everything is quite similar. Everything is you know, based on the simple terms and definitions of the human nature. That is to a great extent about collaboration, right? So if there is no additional efforts placed in terms of media, propaganda, to spread hatred, to spread misinformation, then we will see those natural activities of the civil society more about building bridges. So NGOs, various kinds of organizations, and what is generally called people-to-people diplomacy is mostly about creating those ties and building those bridges.
Indeed, about building bridges, dear Yulia. We again come back to the humanitarian consequences of the crisis in the Middle East. And before you joined, we were looking at the advancement of Israeli forces in the Rafah, which makes it very problematic and fragile at this particular juncture, pertaining the war in Gaza. So how can we navigate this situation to ensure that the already affected community can have access to humanitarian assistance?
Well, at the moment, unfortunately, especially in places like Rafah that are under you know, attacks, we're talking about survival, right? So survival is about the very basic needs, and it's probably not the space where civil society and this kind of people-to-people ties that I was just mentioning would be able to function, just simply because there are major threats and you know, life threats basically. So at this point, the supply of basic humanitarian aid is normally carried out by the relevant international organizations or, let's say, international or foreign authorities that are not directly involved into the conflict, that would be able to carry out rescue operations, provide basic things like food and water, you know, ensure basic sanitation, and ensure that the ones injured and affected are taken care of. And of course, the current conflict means that it would still take years and years to restore and to eliminate the consequences. But at the same time, we're talking about thousands of broken lives, basically, taken lives and broken lives. So it's never easy to fix, and it's always about years. So what takes months to destroy takes years and generations to restore, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, and those actually who pay the price of the war are those the civilians or the vulnerable population. We continue to look at how we can bring, of course, mitigate the consequences of the crisis, and still looking at the major stakes in the Middle East, the position of Iran, Syria, other countries that are actually neighboring countries to the Palestine and Israel. Let's actually look at the potential of the new or interim leaders in Iran. In their, you know, do you think they have the diplomatic capacity to continue to advocate a cause that will eventually settle this dispute in the Middle East?
Well, the leadership of both conflicting parties, that as it was always also mentioned by Steve GILL just now, they have taken quite radical position, and this conflict involves quite a prolonged exchange of various kinds of attacks at the diplomatic level, at the level of media, at the level of physical, physical attacks. So it's not going to be easy to untangle, this knot, let's say. So maybe it would require some mediation from external organizations. But generally speaking, this is one of the cases that the UN was supposed to be dealing with, right? And the Security Council. So it's one of those venues that was designed to also to discuss, conflicts, and also to discuss roadmaps for peace settlement. And there were various kinds of initiatives of the kind, but maybe more of escalation would be needed for the parties to, the conflicting parties to get exhausted, or to have some internal factors kicking in that would allow for a different kind of a negotiation.
So with what you have said, and also looking at the complexities of situations in the Middle East and the interest of various stakeholders involved, can we say it becomes even more difficult to talk about negotiations or even a dialogue to mitigate the conflict or the consequences of the conflict in the Middle East at this particular moment?
At this particular moment, of course, the diplomatic efforts and involvement of the international community could be a game changer. Yet this one, just like the conflict between Russia and the West that is happening in Ukraine, has divided pretty much other actors at the international arena into, the group supporting Israel and the group supporting, for instance, Iran or Palestine or, other actors. So there is no clear solution for this one. Unfortunately, there are also other potentially conflicting areas that could also get on fire if the other international actors get involved. So we're looking at a very fragile situation at the international arena at the moment, when just one little sparkle could ignite either a regional conflict or another regional conflict, as there are many tensions at the map of the world. Or else it could ignite an escalation of an already existing conflict. And that could also pose threats of, let's say, at the global scale, because when some of those actors do possess weapons of mass destruction, you're talking about a completely different, stakes. Yeah. In this situation. So it's a very fragile situation, and probably it means that the existing system of international relations, and especially settlement or conflict settlement mechanisms, starting from the ICC to the UN Security Council to other international organizations, has proven that it's ineffective. Or maybe the groups, let's say, lobbying for military conflicts, and one of the clear ones benefiting from this is the military-industrial complex. Maybe their lobby groups are much stronger than the lobby groups of the ones advocating for peace and advocating for negotiations.
Advocating for peace and negotiations. If I got your point really well, dear Yulia, you made mention of that the world in recent times has recorded a lot of crises, and of course this is happening and affecting the world because the world it's interconnected. So what can we say account for this increasing, crisis or conflicts across the global world? Can we pattern it to, increasing technology that, people are becoming conscious of some of the rhetorics which were actually masterminded by so-called superpowers? Or do you think it's this quest of redefining a new world that we find ourselves in this position, particularly the case in the Middle East?
Well, of course, a lot of it has to do with governance, and a lot of it has to do with the system of nation states that exists, right? Because the government is the only actor that has monopoly for the use of violence, which means that there is the military force, the army, that can be used in the case of external threat. And the military consisting of citizens that are joining either voluntarily or in situations of bigger threats. They're basically, well, I wouldn't say forced, but the state makes them join, and it's a part of the deal, right? So there are quite a lot of potential conflicts that could be arising in different parts of the globe, because territorial issues are always hard to deal with. It's very hard to tell who has more rights unless there is a specific, let's say, agreement that everyone follows. But we have seen the examples of Kosovo when no referendum was held, and the international legislation was ignored to quite a great extent, and a different logic was explaining why Kosovo became a state, right? Sure. In many other cases, the borders of the countries were changing due to military conflict, so it is already existing as a part of the rules of the game that a military conflict can lead to obtaining territory that the government desires for. But yes, to a huge extent, it has to do with the governance system and the nation states and the rules of the game related to them.
Thank you so much, dear Yulia. We are almost rounding off, and we, of course, cannot go without looking at the way forward, patterning of the crisis. Now, there is this particular aspect, because we notice that when, the leadership of Israel, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, when there was this threat of actually closing the borders and actually blocking access of humanitarian assistance, especially in the Rafah and other border lines in the Gaza. When the United States made a statement warning Benjamin Netanyahu that if he goes through with the closing of the border, the United States is going to redefine its policies, its stance on the crisis in the Middle East. And now we see that we also saw that after this, there was, the leadership in Israel changed tactics and narratives. So it already shows that if the U.S. wants the war to end, it can end, since Israel listens to, the leadership of the United States. So with all of these already in the know, what makes it difficult now for the U.S. and maybe other stakeholders to be categorical and intentional about putting an end to the conflicts? Because it takes two parties to understand, to collaborate, to compromise, for us to have the peace and stability that we need, particularly in a very strategic region like the Middle East.
Well, it's important to understand that even within the United States itself, there are conflicting interests and conflicting parties that take different positions also on Israel and on the Middle East as a region, right? So there could be different kinds of signals coming out from the United States, and since it's still is fulfilling its role of the global sheriff that to a great extent has a monopoly on violence at the global arena as the sheriff, let's say, that can justify its actions by its own logic when it's necessary to conduct some kind of a military operation or invasion or whatsoever else. So there is no, I mean, the position that is transmitted is not 100% solid. There could be different signals, yet at the same time, the system of interests is not in favor of, let's say, Palestine or you know, other countries like Iran in terms of the policy of the United States. But I think that what is in the interests of the United States is not to have bigger escalations before the election that will take place in November this year in the United States. So before the election, they don't want any major shakeups and you know, major happenings, yet the possibilities of those are just growing. But maybe you know, we will see how it unfolds and how the campaign goes as well, because the current leadership of the United States, and not just Joe Biden, but the ones that support him and are behind him, right? They are interested in some kind of stability at least till November this year.
Indeed, looking at the rhetoric or the event that will always shape a nation or leaders ahead of elections, we are also aware that there was some sort of protest against the onslaught, particularly on Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And so, looking at this, do you think we're rounding off with this question? How is this, you know, a political strategy that maybe you promote war in another country while using that as a force for to maybe to be elected or re-elected?
Well, you know, there is a very speaking movie that was released in the United States maybe 20 years ago or something like that. It's called Wag the Tail, and that movie pretty much explains how even things like a fake or fabricated military operation serve for an electoral campaign. So instead of going into explanations, I think I would just recommend this Wag the Dog movie that talks about how you know, various kinds of technologies, including fake news and including, you know, propaganda or threats disseminated by the media, can serve for a certain candidate being elected.
Okay, thank you so much, dear Yulia, for your input on today's topic, which focused on event that concern the Middle East, looking at the latest development, the advancement of Israeli forces backed by external parties in the Rafah, looking at the decision by the ICC chief prosecutor to seek an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and of course other leaders, Hamas leaders in war and core, and also asking the question how, if actually the arrest warrant is issued against Israel Benjamin, would nations, Western nations that recognize the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court go ahead to issue an arrest warrant on Netanyahu? That is particularly Italy, France, and Germany, and we also looked at how the controversies in the Middle East is affecting affecting trade and energy supplies. Of course, thinking of that, we actually give a broader understanding to this. I want to thank you so much to this panel of experts for elucidating on the fragility of the situations in the Middle East, and we remain optimistic that this will come to an end someday when the parties, the major parties, decide to end the crisis. Thank you again, Yulia.
Thank you for the invitation and for this very important conversation.
Thank you so much to the technical crew for ensuring, and to you, ladies and gentlemen, for trusting the Pan-African Television. We wish you a lovely moment as you stay in the company of our transmissions. Bye-bye, and see you some other time.